Brad Williams, Frugal Finance, swaps, the all-in cost. The all-in cost is the internal rate of return for a given financing alternative. It is called the all-in cost because it includes all costs associated with the alternative being evaluated, such as floating costs and administrative expenses, as well as the actual cash flows for the instrument being evaluated. As such, all-in cost represents an effective annual percentage cost and provides a comprehensive basis for comparing different financing alternatives. As we will see in some other comprehensive applications later in this section, the all-in cost is a useful technique in a variety of situations. We illustrate the concept of the all-in cost by comparing two financing alternatives available to the firm that are different in structure, but they have very similar actual cash flows. The first instrument is a 10-year semi-annual payment bond with a principal amount of $40 million and a coupon rate of 7%. The instrument is priced at par. We have this P equals M of sigma, all right, where M is the maturity date of the bond, C of T is the cash flow from the bond at time T, which could be principal or interest, and Y is the yield to maturity. In equation 22.1, Y is the yield to maturity on the bond, which is also the internal rate of return that equates the price and the present value of the cash flows associated with the bond. Therefore, the yield to maturity meets the definition of the all-in cost for this bond. Because the bond pays a coupon of 7% and is priced at par, the yield on the bond and the all-in costs are 7%. Therefore, the firm can secure its fixed rate financing at an all-in cost of 7% by issuing a straight bond. As a second financing alternative, the firm can borrow $40 million for 10 years at a floating rate of SOFR plus 30 basis points, with the rate being reset each 6 months. SOFR currently stands at 6.5%. Because the firm currently faces a floating finance rate of 6.8%, it looks attractive compared to the 7% fixed rate financing vehicle. However, the firm has determined to secure fixed rate financing. As we saw earlier in this section, issuing a floating rate bond combined with a pay fixed, receive floating interest rate swap is equivalent to a fixed rate bond. Upon inquiry, the firm learns that it can enter a pay fixed, receive floating interest rate swap to pay 6.5% and receive SOFR. The fee for arranging the swap and the associated administrative costs is an immediate payment of $400,000. In summary of this second financing alternative, the firm would borrow $40 million at a floating rate of 6.8%, and it would enter a swap agreement to pay fixed 6.5% and receive SOFR. The firm must also pay $400,000 fee for the swap. It will net only $39.6 million of actual financing. The two financing alternatives have very similar cash flows, and both imply a fixed rate financing of about $40 million. The financing choice then decreases to comparing the all-in costs of the two deals. Figure 22.6 shows the cash flow line for the second financing alternative, reflecting the effect of the swap. The firm receives $39.6 million at inception, makes 20 semi-annual payments of $1.36 million, and repays the principal of $40 million at the end of 10 years. The all-in cost for the second alternative is simply the internal rate of return that equates the present cash flow inflow of $39.6 million with all of the other cash outflows. For these flows, the internal rate of return is 0.034703 on a semi-annual basis, or 0.069406 on an annual term. This is slightly lower than the 7% internal rate of return on the straight bond financing. The firm prefers the floating rate instrument coupled with the interest rate swap, being able to compute the internal rate of return on the two deals and compare the all-in costs leads to the correct decision. However, the firm should also be aware that the 6 basis point differential might simply reflect an additional credit risk on the swap if the market is fully efficient. If so, the firm would be indifferent between the two financing alternatives. A lot to think about as a CFO when you're moving money around. Brad Williams, Frugal Finance. Thanks for watching.